Okay, we've now admitted everybody and we are getting ready to go. So one question we wanted to do just before we started is to make sure that everybody can hear us. So what we'd like you to do is either at the bottom of your screen or top of your screen, you'll see a black bar with a whole bunch of Zoom controls on there. If you click on the one that says participants, you're going to see a list of the participants. And at the very bottom of that list, you're going to see a group of reactions. So what we're going to ask you is, if you can hear us, click on the green checkbox. You'll see it sort of here in the green checkbox. Oh, look at that, bang. You guys are a very quick Zoom crowd to respond. That is fantastic. Okay, wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. So I will now pass it over to Carolyn, who's going to start us off for the webinar.
Hey, great. Thank you very much. So my name is Carolyn Samuel. I'm a Senior Academic Associate with Teaching and Learning Services, and I'll be co-hosting today's webinar with my colleague, Adam Finkelstein, who is an Associate Director at Teaching and Learning Services. And we're here also with one of our colleagues, Eva Dobler, who will be moderating the chat. So you may have seen in that bar that Adam was talking about before, there is an option for chat, and you will have an opportunity to post some questions that we will answer throughout the webinar. We do have a short slideshow to go through. I will stop periodically along the way to allow you time to type in questions, because we did get some feedback that it can be challenging to listen to us and try to type in questions simultaneously. So you can listen and sit back, and then we will allow time for you to type questions. When you do type the questions, please type them to everyone rather than typing them privately to Eva, our moderator, because that way we can all see the questions and then we can share the answers with everybody. So we've entitled our webinar Teaching Remotely and Redesigning Assessments in a Demanding Time. So that is the situation we're living right now. We do have a couple of, well, 3 goals for this session. We'd like to provide you with the experience of engaging with others via Zoom. So this is what your students are likely going to experience next week, and we thought you might like to have a go at it first. We're hoping you'll become aware of resources available on the TLS website that will help you when you start teaching remotely. And today's content might help you formulate ideas for changing assessments in your course or courses. And there's not really a one-size-fits-all for this. So you have to think about changes that will be really appropriate for whatever courses you offer. And these changes should also be manageable for you and for your students, because teaching and learning remotely might be new for both of you. We have a message we want to get out to people, and that is keep it simple, period. This has the potential for being challenging. Moving to remote teaching has the potential for being challenging for everybody. So try not to tax yourselves too much and try not to tax the students too much. You might be unfamiliar with it. Your students might be unfamiliar with remote learning. And sometimes we think of our students as being digital natives, but they might be skilled at using social media tools, things like Instagram or Facebook. That doesn't mean that they are skilled at learning from online lectures or skilled at taking quizzes in my courses. So the tools are different. They might be uncomfortable with them. In addition, your students may have preoccupations that affect their concentration. So all of us have a lot going on at the moment. So it's possible that your students won't be in the best circumstances to demonstrate their learning. So that's important to keep in mind when you're making changes to your course for remote teaching. Please keep well-being in mind, both your students' well-being and your well-being. That's really important at this time. So now we're going to look at some resources for teaching remotely, and I'm going to turn this over to Adam, who's going to say a few words.
Great, thanks, Carolyn. Yes, we really want to stress that keep it simple as much as possible. That said, we want to make sure that you are aware of resources that are available to you in that transition to be able to teach remotely. And the 2 ones we really want to focus on, one you probably already know about, which is My Courses, which is what everybody is able to use for teaching and enhancing their existing campus courses in the past, but Zoom, which is also a new tool. So I'll talk about My Courses second, but let me just mention Zoom for a minute. Zoom, of course, is an interactive synchronous communication communications tool, which is what you're looking at right now, where you're able to actually have a video conversation where one person can talk to many, people can talk amongst each others. You can actually use screen sharing to share your screen for a presentation or any type of thing you're doing on your computer, including annotating. So Carolyn, thank you. Just sort of circled the Zoom as a good example. And one of the nice things about Zoom is, besides being able to share your screen and annotate, there is also a whiteboard that you can actually bring up and write on. You can even share a mobile device as part of that and actually draw. If you have a tablet or if a Surface, you have a Microsoft Surface, you can draw equations out as part of that process. So it really allows you a lot of interactivity that you're doing. Zoom also enables breakout rooms. So you could take a group of 100 people and break them out randomly into smaller groups to have discussions, to share media, share files, collaborate on a document, collaborate on a whiteboard, and being able, of course, to record everything you're doing and making them available in my courses to your students. We have a couple of different levels of Zoom accounts. Everybody at McGill gets a basic account. That includes students, staff, instructors, etc. There, of course, are two limitations. One, with that basic account, is a maximum use of 40 minutes at a time. And the second is that there is a 100-person capacity maximum. And the third part I should mention, I forgot, is that you can only record to your local computer. However, all those that are teaching this term, that are teaching courses this term, have had their Zoom accounts elevated to a license model, and the license allows you to actually have an unlimited meeting time. Actually, I think it's 24 hours, which is the limit, but an unlimited meeting time, and then also the ability to have up to 300 participants in any of the rooms that you create. So what's, of course, is that if you are teaching a course over 300 or even over 500, we have some other mechanisms that are going to be in place before Monday for you to be able to actually have your accounts upgraded to support a very large group. So that's one of the possibilities. But now you don't need to worry about all the things I said, because actually everything I've talked about is in fact already on the Zoom page in this presentation here. And Ava, thankfully, has actually posted in the chat where you can click on in the chat and see a whole bunch of different step-by-step instructions on how to do everything that I just talked about in Zoom, including scheduling meetings, doing breakout rooms, all of that stuff. Of course, if you have any questions about using Zoom, you can also go contact IT support, and IT will actually either address those or elevate them to the people that need to answer them in our groups as well. Also, with terms of resources for Zoom, there is another great resource for students. So Ava just posted that in the chat. And we have links to that on the website. And that actually is a great tip for students that are starting to use Zoom. What do you need to worry about? What do you need to do? How do you get prepared? How do you make sure you have the right computer? All that sort of stuff is all there. So the second thing I wanted to mention is my courses. So of course, everything the instructors have already had support for in my courses continues. There's lots of options in terms of interaction, assessment tools, online assignments, online quizzes, etc. But what we've done is we've opened up another avenue for support. So besides the regular support that we might be doing, which involves, of course, IT support, where you can email them and get access to help, or go online and look at any of the information in the knowledge base. We've also created a course in my courses that's a series of self-paced modules that you can do called My Courses Essentials. And what's great about My Courses Essentials, it has a whole bunch of different areas that you can choose from, let's say assessment, and then look at the section on quizzes as a good example. And it goes through step by step with videos, with all sorts of different instructions that you can access at your own pace on how to do all different things within my courses. And like Carolyn has just circled that here, the My Courses Essentials course. You should see that in your list when you are when you go to My Courses and log in. I should also mention that there's also a great discussions forum that we've opened up inside My Courses. And one of the nice things about the discussion forums in the My Courses Essentials is we have a whole bunch of different topics on different areas, like what we've discussed, where you can ask a very specific question and you'll get some immediate answers. We have people monitoring these boards all through the day and into the evening as well, that can give some step-by-step instructions. And the nice thing about these discussion boards is you can see the types of questions that other people are asking as well. So that's sort of the My Courses in a nutshell. And just to jump back to the last things that we want to mention, is that we really urge you to look at your colleagues as a possibility for support. So a lot of people want to try out using Zoom. You know what? There's no one better to try using Zoom with than either your family or your family that's extended that you can't actually meet with at the moment or can't go to their house, or colleagues that you've been working with. You know, setting up a Zoom room with a couple of colleagues and trying out some different things with Zoom really gives you a great opportunity to have that experience and to work through some of those opportunities and experiences for trying things out with Zoom. In addition, we suggest you do that also with your students. So having a sort of a buddy system or telling your students to open some of that up as well is also a really important thing that you'd be able to do. So that's kind of questions and everything all about resources available for teaching remotely. Again, everything is all available on the website in the links that we posted. But I think what we'll do is pause there and open it up for questions that people might have. Now, for questions, you can just go to the chat, type the questions, and we'll see if we can address those questions as they come in. And if a lot of them come in, don't worry. That's what Ava's here to help with. She can actually answer the questions as we're going. So anybody has any questions? Go for it. Now's the time.
This sort of replicates what goes on in a classroom when you say, are there any questions? And then you just, there's just silence in the room. But sometimes it takes a few minutes for people to think of things.
Exactly.
I want to briefly pipe in and say, well, if you have larger classes, we highly recommend that you ask your TAs to moderate the chat, because it's very hard to teach and moderate the chat at the same time. So as Carolyn and Adam are leading the webinar, I'm looking at the chat to see if something comes up.
And so I think there's already one of the questions here, but just to add on to that as well, if you don't have a TA, it actually might be helpful to ask one of your students that may be able to help out. That might be really useful, but keep in mind, it does take a lot of cognitive overhead to do. And so, you know, you may not want to ask one of the students in your class, maybe another student that you have or another student in another class that you know that could help you out. So one of the questions about students who will be running using their phones, I think it'll work as a chew up data. It definitely uses data. There's no question about that. Getting on Wi-Fi is probably a very smart idea for anybody using anything with their phones. But yes, Zoom works extremely well with phones and with tablets and with mobile devices. It's a slightly different kind of interface you're looking at. And of course, keep in mind, it's definitely smaller. So if you're doing small things in PowerPoint, you have to be aware that it might be a little bit difficult to see, but yes, it will work perfectly fine. Also, Petra asked about pre-recording lectures using Zoom and posting them. Absolutely, all of those instructions are available on our Zoom page about how you pre-record and post. The pre-recording can be done with Zoom or any other program that you like, and you can also upload videos that you've done with something else directly into our recording system that'll be available.
And we do have another question about recording 40-minute lectures. So it's a recommended practice to actually record shorter chunks, so maybe 7 to 10 minutes. And if you do want to do one long lecture, then maybe pause in between. So speak for 7 minutes perhaps, and then pose a question and allow students some thinking time. But 40 minutes would be awfully long. So we recommend chunks or big pauses in between. And maybe Adam, you can address the question of file size. So how large a file would 40 minutes generate? I don't know how large a file that would be.
It could be quite large. I'm just going to tell you that now, that there's no small thing, that it is large. However, one of the benefits of being able to put it into my courses is the procedures that we have to leverage our lecture recording system will enable it to be streamed in a way that will make it sort of higher quality, lower quality for those that are accessing it from a remote distance.
And then of course, Ava's suggestion is very good, to record audio only for smaller size.
Yeah, and actually in Zoom, you can even parse out the audio and have it store both files if you really want as well. So I think there's another question here about initiated a meeting with your lab. Keep in mind, Zoom is basically dedicated for teaching use. So if you're doing things with research, or you're doing things for admin, or you're having meetings with other people, IT has an entire work from home page that talks about using other tools like Microsoft Teams to be able to have those kind of non-teaching meetings. If you're doing an actual teaching event and for some reason it's not showing up as a professional, the license that you should see as an instructor teaching courses, please let IT know and they'll be able to investigate why.
Okay, so maybe we'll come back to the slides because we have a little bit more content to look at. And let me just advance here. So we wanted to make you aware of 5 principles for making decisions about assessment in challenging times, because we've all been working sort of under pressure. And we're proposing the 5 principles right here: simplify, prioritize, offer alternative assessment formats, consider extending assignment deadlines, and communicate. So we're not going to go through all of them, but I did want to highlight the communicate one. For 2 weeks, teaching and learning activities have been suspended, but that does not mean you can't communicate with your students. You still can, and we would encourage you to do that. Send them an email through My Courses, let them know you're still around, that you're preparing to get back to teaching next week, and your students will probably be very happy to hear from you. They might be in various states of anxiety or feel concerned, so they'll be happy to know that you're still around and that you're going to get back with them next week. We've also prepared a number of scenarios to help you see how these 5 principles can be operationalized. And I'm going to take you to the website now. We're going to leave the slides, and I just want to point out that on each of our slides we have the hyperlinks to where you can find the information on the web. And these slides are already available on the TLS website on the same page where you found the link to today's webinar. So I'm going to go to class disruption and assessment and principles. I'm just going to take this out of here and go to the TLS web page and let me just go down here to disruption, to classes, and I'm going down here to, the 5 principles. And if I scroll down, here we have 8 example scenarios that illustrate how you might apply the principles. And in this first one, for example, you might have had a second midterm planned. You decide that you're not going to do it because it doesn't make sense anymore. So instead of that, you decide to split that 20% by adding 10% to the first midterm you had and 10% to the final exam. So it's a redistribution of the grade. That might be simpler than coming up with something all new. So that goes back to our original piece of advice: keep it simple. So as I said, we have 8 scenarios here on this page, and you can take a look through to see if anything is suitable for your course, and maybe you'll be inspired by what you see here. So I'm going to go back to our slides. We also wanted to make you aware of some considerations and guidelines for redesigning grading schemes. So one guideline is, if you've got 2/3 of students' grades already finalized, maybe just cancel the final exam and convert the grade to something over 100. That's simple. So remember, keep it simple. 2/3 is a guideline though. It could be a little bit more, it could be a little bit less. It always has to be appropriate for your course context. If 2/3 of the grade is not yet finalized, consider canceling the final exam and maybe replacing that with an assignment to bring students to that 2/3 threshold. Again, it's not a rule, and you can think of it as a little bit more, a little bit less. If you're going to change the format, maybe you move to an open book exam, and I'm going to say a word about why 48 hours minimum is good. So I'm actually going to take you to the website. So again, we've got the link here, so you can always go to it. And I'm going to go to the disruption page and redesigning grading schemes. So I'm going to scroll up just a little bit and to the disruption page and redesigning grading schemes. And if we scroll down the page and we look at where it says change format, a 48-hour window is advised, as this minimizes the likelihood of exam conflicts and the occurrence of time duration accommodations for students registered with the OSD. So if you're going to give an exam, change to an open book exam, let's say, where students do this on their own at home, giving a window of 48 hours or more removes a barrier for students who are registered with the OSD for time constraint reasons. So that's the recommendation, minimum 48 hours. Also, please know that you can set up timed exams in my courses, timed quizzes, timed exams. So if you want to have, for example, a 3-hour exam, you can have it open for 48 hours, but students have to finish it within 3 hours of the time that they start. So just something to keep in mind with your planning. You can also leave it open for students for them to complete it within a 48-hour block. So that's entirely up to you. And I think we'll stop there for now in case anybody has questions. Let's take a look. Type your questions in the chat right now. Looks like this might be clear for everybody. That's okay. We'll keep going. So we have some information here about the satisfactory, unsatisfactory option and late withdrawals. Students typically are allowed to select the SU option until the end of the add drop period. This has been changed in light of these extraordinary circumstances, and students can now choose this option until May 22nd. That means students will have their final grades before they make this decision. This is important. It gives students some flexibility, and that's a good thing given the challenging times. The advantage for students of the satisfactory, unsatisfactory option is that the grade does not count in their GPA. Now, we do have an asterisk next to this. I'm just going to indicate that here. So we do have this asterisk here. In some cases, the SU might not hold, for example, in programs where there is accreditation. So we recommend that you check with your academic unit to see if there are any constraints around the SU option for students in specific programs in your unit. The late withdrawal date has been extended to April 15th. And I'm going to take you, the information on this slide does appear on this page, but since we prepared these slides, some more recent information has become available. The dates still hold, but there's a nicer page, a clearer page to look at for this information. And I'm just putting it up here. It's called Adjusted Academic Measures for Winter 2020, and it's under Student Records. I'll just scroll up there, under Student Records. And we have a very clear display here of the options for students and the universally applied measures. So that's something you can take a look at on your own. And maybe Ava, you can put the link in the chat, please. Let me just go back up. So that's Adjusted Academic Measures for Winter 2020, and it's under Student Records. Now I'll go back to the slides.
Yeah, so Carolyn, there's an interesting question here from Peter who talks about, suggestions about how to handle courses where numeric problem solving is the outcome, like accounting or maybe calculus, and the concerns that if there's a single answer and that everybody should be putting the same answer, how to a gradient. And so one of my questions would be is maybe you're not looking necessarily for that single answer, but the process that gets to the answer. So a written out exam in those kind of cases is extremely helpful because you'll see the thinking that brought to the right answer, which is more important in many ways than the actual right answer itself. But Carolyn, do you want to add to that?
Well, I'd like to add that we are now going into a different type of teaching and a different type of learning. We do need to be flexible in our approach. And yeah, I mean, that's right on. Like maybe it's not about the answer right now, maybe it is about the process. So we're going to have to think those things through and reconsider how students will demonstrate their learning. So
a great example, practically example might be is that if you see this as a take-home exam that students have to write out and they take pictures of their problems that they've written out and they submit it back as their answers. So it's not about necessarily selecting, A, B, C, D, but more, here's my problem, I'm submitting it back to you for grading. And the assignment tools, as an example, will allow for a picture as part of that or a written out explanation or something along those lines.
It's going to take some creativity, but actually many of these ideas are already out there. So we've actually put, well, you know what, I'm going to go back to the web and show you something that may be of interest. I'm going to the TLS website again, and on the TLS website in the menu here, discipline-specific resources for remote instruction. So you might want to take a look. We have a whole section down here on STEM and health sciences. There are some things here for mathematics. So you might take a look at that and see if there are some good ideas. Just to note, this is a non-curated list. So non-curated list is something that TLS has put together from many resources that have become available to us through different listservs. There's a lot of sharing going on. So we've put this together for you, but it's non-curated, so you'll have to take a look to see if there's something that will be useful for you. But based on the original sources, there could be some good things here. Okay, so let me just go back and we'll keep going. We've had some questions about academic integrity, about students potentially cheating on their exams, about lectures being made publicly available. So we have some suggestions for you about managing academic integrity, or fostering, not managing. And I'm going to go to our web page. And again, all the links are here, but I'll take you to the web page in case you want to go back and find these things afterward. And this is on our teaching continuity page. Clicking on that, I'm scrolling down the page, and we have a section right here called Foster Academic Integrity. So one thing you can do is put McGill's academic integrity statement on the cover page of every exam or assignment. Of course, that's virtual, but at the beginning of every exam or assignment, you can remind students about that academic integrity statement. You might want to have students sign an honor code. So we've got an example right here. I will be fair and honest in my coursework. I will neither give nor receive unauthorized aid on any assignments, quizzes, or exams. So you could have students send you an email acknowledging that statement and saying that they will adhere to it. So there is some literature, there are some studies that have shown the potential for minimizing cheating when you use an honor code of that sort, of that type. And we've got resources listed here at the bottom of the page, and there are some others that are in the My Courses discussion forum, the My Courses Essentials discussion forum that Adam was talking about earlier. If you're concerned about your lectures being made publicly available, you can remind students about intellectual property rights. And we've got some language here on the site that you can just copy and paste into your My Courses site. For example, you can put this in the announcements tool. And then we also have the statement here about instructor-generated course materials, which you might want to include as well, so that students understand that this is your intellectual property.
And I think just to add to that as well, I think one of the things that's important is that in the process of doing the recordings, you can shut off downloads and just have them streamed. One thing to be aware of course, is that will make things difficult for some students that might be in situations where streaming it completely from McGill might be problematic. But again, you'll have to see it in each instance with your students, what is going to work. I think there's another question here about students bombing and disrupting the lecture. I think this is a really good one, Lorraine, and I think Ava gave a good initial response to that, which is really clear that you can, for example, when you set up your classes, make sure people are muted on entry, so they come in muted. And you can actually, in this case, as a host, enable people not to unmute themselves. So that's one important thing as well. In addition, you can ensure that people sign in order to access the meeting. It basically means that you have to be part of McGill, and it recognizes who you are. So anybody that decides to do something, even if they can, like if you open it up and have anybody talk and somebody really gets out of control, you know who they are. The list is really clear right there, and you know who the person is. In addition, you can always, mute people. So one of the things that you can do as a host is mute anybody, shut off their video, all that stuff, as well as you can actually kick people out. But I think that might be a little extreme. So there's definitely lots of opportunities and for that kind of control. A lot of that is on the website as well.
Okay, I'm just watching the time. We only have like a minute or two left, so I want to just show people that if you need help getting reserve material from the library or other materials for your students, contact your liaison librarian. We've been in touch with librarians. They're eager to help you. So don't hesitate to contact them. You just click on the link here and there's a hyperlink to find your liaison librarian. They will help you get material into my courses. We also have a link here to information about accessibility, and on the OSD site, there is an FAQ for instructors. So the Office for Students with Disabilities has compiled a faculty and staff FAQ page. So we'd encourage you to take a look at that. Going back to the slides, and let's see what we have. Some assignment deadlines. Again, the page that I mentioned earlier is now more up to date than this. The dates here are correct, but they are presented perhaps in a clearer way on that academic adjustments page. So I'm going to skip this one because we've already seen some of those dates and just go to our last slide, which is keep it simple, keep well-being in mind, yours and your students. That is very important. I'd like to take just a moment to thank PLS colleagues who helped put together all the resources that are on our website and who contributed to this webinar. We also, I'm just realizing we should show one more thing from the TLS website. We have resources in the students section right here for students. Remote learning resources. There are webinars for students right here and a number of strategies for students to support them with learning remotely because it might be new for them. So we would encourage you to put this URL in your My Courses site to support students. Adam, any last words?
No, I just want to thank everybody for coming, and thank everybody for engaging. Of course, thanking Carolyn, co-hosts Ava and Carolyn, and myself co-hosting this this session. It's been really great to see your interest. And if you have any other questions, feel free to post them in the chat. We can stick around for a minute or two. And other than that, good luck. Please, again, keep things simple and be safe.
We're getting some thank yous. So you're very welcome, and we're glad you were able to join us today. Doesn't look like we're getting any